So you're new to touring and you don't want to piss off your sound engineer. Or you're a seasoned vet and you can't stop pissing off your sound engineer. Well, this video is for you. Hey guys, I'd like to introduce you to Eddie Caipo. I've been touring with Eddie. Eddie, how long has it been? Like since 2011, so going on 10 years. Yeah, 9 years.
Yes.
We toured with Smash Mouth together. We toured with Enrique together. This guy has seen it all, done it all. He's one of the most professional engineers I've ever worked with. And I wanted to ask him a few of the basic questions that I feel like you all need to know. So with that in mind, let's get to it. So Eddie is a sound engineer in general. He does front of house as well as monitors, and I'd kind of like him to explain to us what the difference is for people who don't know. Take it away.
Well, front of house engineers have the responsibility of mixing what you're going to listen to, the audience, what the audience is going to listen to. So they're in charge of portraying the vision that the artist has from their albums to the audience.
Cool.
When it comes to monitors, our job is basically to give the artist what they want. It's not a mix that I want to make.
Give the artist what they want. Yeah.
Give the artist what they want. Exactly. It's not. It's a position of service. You're not mixing for you. You're mixing for them. You know. So, that makes it slightly difficult sometimes because you might think this is going to be better for you, but better is not necessarily what they want. They just want whatever is necessary for them to make the show happen, to be able to perform, whether it's anything that gives them pitch, anything that gives them timing, say drums, click tracks, or a lot of piano, a lot of guitar, a lot of their vocals, whatever it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be a album mix or anything like that. It's just whatever they need. So that's one of the differences between, I guess, a monitor engineer and a front house engineer.
Right. Although when you work with me, you know me so well. I love to hear, just give me the whole mix. Give me make it sound like you're in front of house. Make it sound like an album, and you do it amazing. I mentioned it in the video that I'm gonna post here right now. We were talking about in-ears. I mentioned Eddie at length, talking about all the wonderful things that he does, and you should go check it out and learn some stuff about in-ears. But back to what we're talking about. Now you kind of get the idea about what the difference is between front of house engineer and monitor engineer. Now, when I worked with Eddie with Smash Mouth, he was doing both, or as some might say, both. Just saying,
both.
Both. But with Enrique, we have Brad Divins on front of house, and Eddie is doing monitors, doing an amazing job on monitors. So now that we know the difference, I'd love to ask you, so for someone that's brand new to touring, or not even touring, just performing, getting on stage with his friends, all they've done before is they've been in a rehearsal spot, and they finally get their big break. They're going to be on stages for the next few weeks. Without their engineers, they're not lucky to have an Eddie with them. They're not lucky to have a Brad with them. They're just going there and they're like, okay, well, we practiced, now what? They don't have a language in common yet with engineers. And I'd love for you to tell us maybe what they could do, what language could they use to really kind of get along with their engineers to, first of all, not piss them off, not piss the engineers off, and also to kind of be really transparent about what they want. Also, maybe knowing what they can get from the engineer. This might be a good time to point that out.
That's a good question because I think it covers a few things and I've been asked this question many times about why or what to do not to piss off the engineer. Now, usually when you have an engineer that is getting pissed off fairly quickly, I find that to be, because I've been on the other side, I perform too. I used to play in a band and I've gone through that.
Drummer, right?
And percussion and keyboard is what I used to play.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, so I just feel that it's unfair when people say, that engineer, what to do to not piss him off. You know what? He's there to help you. Like the engineer is there to make sure you're taken care of, that you sound good, that you can hear yourself. That whole thing was like, well, what should we say not to piss him off? You know what? If he's going to get pissed off, he shouldn't be doing this job, first of all. Like, this is a beautiful career to have. It's fun, and you're working with great talent, and you're traveling and all this stuff. So there's always those grumpy ones. I will hate to define that question, including all those grumpy ones. I think, is there stuff that could piss you off? Yes. Is there stuff that is going to annoy us? Probably. But that will be at the very end, when it's just a necessary request. But if it's just a regular request, and some engineers are just getting annoyed or grumpy, or I don't know, we should dismiss those. That group of people is a very small amount, right?
But keep in mind, Eddie, that group of people is probably who you're going to run into in the smaller gigs. Yeah, it's so I sort of want to touch on that a little. Like, if I'm dealing with you,
absolutely, yeah. I don't mean that I'm going to dismiss the question. I mean, it's more like, I don't want people to go and do their first performance and already have the fear of like, oh, should I even ask him for anything? Because he must. What if he's one of the grumpy ones? No, like, if it happens, it happens. But not everybody's like that. Yes, I've run into people who are like that, and I usually just move along and move on, right? But anyway, so anybody who's starting out, I feel that they should just ask. If they don't know what to ask for, they should certainly ask for their own instrument. Unless you're a drummer, you might get away with not having your instrument, but
because you can hear it, or if you have an amplifier,
correct. Or if you have a guitar amp, and you might be able to get away with not having that on the monitors. But if you are playing guitar and you're singing, maybe ask for stuff that is not amplified already. Maybe put your vocal. If you're working with Wedges, just give me a little bit of my voice, that dude's voice, and a little bit of the keyboard. Stuff that you normally wouldn't be able to hear in your position. And as you move forward, and as you get more experience, and your show becomes more elaborated, perhaps you could ask him, maybe give me some of the tracks, or maybe give me a little kick and snare. Ask for more things when it comes to Wedges, right? When it comes to in-ears, I would say, if you're starting out, kind of the same thing. Keep it simple, because if you're not traveling with an engineer, they're not going to be able to kind of know what you need, especially if it's someone who maybe doesn't care as much, or it's just a day job to them, the grumpy old sound guy that shows up, and you're expecting them to give you like a really good mix. They won't. They might just like, what do you need? Okay, here's some kick, here's some this, here's some that, and then they'll move on. Try to ask for just the bare necessities at the beginning, I would say.
That's a good idea.
Until you gather experience, until you gather, more confidence in what you actually need. Because if you go and start saying, well, I'm not sure if I need this, I'm not sure if I need that, then the engineer is going to be like, well, I can only give you what you're asking me. I can suggest that maybe you want this, you want that, but you may not like it, whatever. So there's engineers that really care, and I'm proud to say that I'm one of them. And ever since I've been in starting in clubs, and tiny clubs, mixing with 2 or 3 microphones only, I would always approach it as if I'm mixing, I don't know, the Rolling Stones or Prince. Didn't matter. I would always feel like I gotta give him the best that I have, best that I got, to make sure that the whole thing sounds good. And with that in mind, I always approach it, whether it's front of house or monitors. Try to give them what they want. If they don't know, I will give them suggestions, or I will guide them through the process. I never say, oh, these people, they don't have experience, so screw them.
Right.
No, never. Like, you try to guide them through the process. Because I'm always going to bump into someone who probably has more experience than me. Or maybe I'm going to get hired by an artist who has 20 more years as a career than I do as an engineer. So you can't walk in thinking that you know it all, or also the artist shouldn't expect the engineer to ignore him. There's so many, chapters to that, because a lot of engineers also dismiss what the artist wants. They go, oh, yeah, they're just crazy.
He doesn't know what he wants. I'm just going to act like I'm raising the fader. I'm not going to give him what he wants.
Correct. And I feel that that's not cool either, because the artist may not know technically how to ask for it, but they know that something's not right, or they know that they can't hear themselves, and they need us with our expertise to say, you know what, I'm listening to your mix, and I feel that your vocal, because you keep asking for more vocal, but instead of, I think you just keep getting louder and louder. What if I remove some of the band, or I just lower the band by 30%, and maybe just feature the guitars a little more so you can have some pitch? And and that alone might clean up the mix. Instead, usually because they don't know, perhaps they just keep turning up their pack, and it just gets louder and louder, and it's not a pleasant mix for anybody at that point.
Right.
So we're there to guide people. We're there to like I said, it's at monitors, at least the position of monitors is we're at their service. You know, if they want something, let's try to help them out. Let's try to guide them through the process. It's not just like, no, man, that's not how I mix. It's really not about that. It's about us giving them what they want. Some artists, some musicians like yourself, you want a full mix. In fact, you like your guitar kind of in the mix, which is awesome. You want it where the guitar will sit kind of.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit above on certain songs if you need it or whatever. But overall, you want to be in the mix, right? And that's great. And you want kind of a full mix and everything. Other people may just want their instrument, click track, and their vocal. And they don't want nothing else.
And that's fine.
And I'm like,
yeah.
And that's fine. I can suggest. I had a couple quick anecdotes, if I may. Like a drummer that I was working for, this artist, this very big artist. And this is like my first day. I dial him up. The tech is saying, "Oh my God, he's gonna love these drum sounds. It's like a record, and this is incredible. Wow, we never had this. Blah blah blah." It's being very complimented. So I go, "Okay, cool, that's great." Drummer shows up. He goes, "Oh, this drums. Take all my drums off. Take everything off. Just leave me the click, her vocal, and this and that. That's it. I don't want anything else." I'm like, "Really?" It's like, "Yeah," and that was it. Like I spent some time really tweaking something, but that's not what he wanted or needed.
Yeah.
He wanted to hear the drums from the bleed from the headphones or something. He was wearing headphones, not in-ears, so he would just kind of like take one side off and he would just guide himself with a click and just kind of like play the drums live. So he wasn't interested in that. Another drummer, same thing. He, said, "I don't want any of my drums on my mix." Cool, no problem. I removed them. And then little by little, he started hearing from other people that, that they really enjoy their mixes. You should check it out. You should try to, or maybe he had a bad experience before where they were gating his drums too much. And next thing you know, he goes, "Give me a little bit of my drums." And he started little by little. And he ended up having a good mix of drums in his ears afterwards. But it took a while. You have to earn the trust. And if they had a bad experience with in-ears, it's very hard to erase it also. So that's something that I've encountered. When people had a bad experience, they don't want to see him ever again.
I do want to add regarding just my 2 cents. Feel free to tell me what you think, but I feel like people need to realize, because some artists aren't really nice to engineers either. It's not just the engineers that can be grumpy. The artists can be grumpy as well. And I feel like it's important to let artists know that the person that's on the board is just a human being. They might have had a crappy day. They might have had an amazing day. They may want to give you everything they can, or they may not really give a shit. I always find it important to go introduce myself. If I'm going to be working with some guy on the monitor engineer, I'm going to be working with the monitor engineer, I'll go to him, and if he's there already when I get up on stage, if he's not, then I don't. But if he's there, I'll just go like, "Hey man, I'm Sean, I'm the guitarist. What's your name?" "Adam." "Cool, nice to meet you." And that's it. Just kind of get a little rapport. Say that again.
Here's an apple.
Yeah, here's an apple. Here's some extra $500. Is that cool? But yeah, it's like I like to just build a little rapport, because so many times the crew gets treated like crap. So I know that goes a long way, because I used to be crew, and maybe I'll be crew again sometime in the future. I loved that job. It's nice to go and actually respect the crew a little and go introduce yourself. Find out what the name is of the person that's going to be helping you. So that usually helps me, even if they are grumpy to begin with, that'll usually help me bring that down a little. Like they might want to help me a little, because I came in and introduced
I think
myself.
it's good to break the ice.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's good to break the ice, and a lot of times, because engineers every now and then get the blame for all kinds of stuff, then it's you coming in and introducing yourself, showing them that you care also from the musician side and on a personal level. It also creates a good rapport. Being a monitor engineer specifically, since that's kind of what we're talking about, it's a career of trust. Like Like there's a million engineers better than me, but there's not. I mean, just by comparison, I'm saying there's not as many that are able to have that maybe people, skill where you're able to talk to musicians or big artists and be assertive without being disrespectful and be competent as you're speaking about certain things with them, make them feel at ease, without kissing their ass. That's all those things, because artists are very perceptive. They're, like you said, they're humans too, and it's not like they're not going to understand if you say something, but they're surrounded by people to say yes to everything. So if you're honest with them when it comes to things and technical stuff or questions that they may ask, and you don't like bullshit them, or you don't try to steer them in the wrong direction or trick them into something, then they respect you for it. They're gonna realize immediately that you're being honest with them. And that's important. You have to develop that trust. If an artist doesn't trust their monitor engineer in this case, it will never work. There are always going to be fights, or they're going to get fired, then rehired, and it's one of those things. But you have to develop trust.
A friend of mine used to say, "It's all about the love."
It is all about the love. It's about the connection.
It's about the connection. So you mentioned wedges before, and I'm curious if you could tell the viewers what a wedge is and kind of explain the do's and don'ts of working with wedges, or what can you have, what can be too much, stuff like that.
Yeah, wedges are basically, small speakers, usually, biamp, 2 speakers, a horn and a 15 or a 12, that basically are facing the artist, are facing you when you're performing. That allows you to hear yourself or others from stage. I mean, on a nutshell, what you should try to do when you have that, because besides wedges, you can have side fills, which is like a small PA on the sides of the stage, pointing at the stage as well. What you can do with that is basically ask for the instruments that are far from you or far away from you, and that allows you to, everybody kind of keep in sync with each other, if you are in a position that you can get, you have an engineer and you can get a lot of the instruments that you want in there, or a whole drum set in there, then go for it. But always keeping in mind that the more you add in that position that you're in, you're clouding your mix. So if you're going to have a vocal there as well, and you want kick, snare, hat, toms, everyone through it, bass, guitars, keys in there, and you want them just as loud as everything else, then it's going to come a point where they cannot turn your vocal any louder, because either it will just feedback, and yes, you can remove feedback with EQ filters and things like that, but when you start doing that, it just takes away the quality of your vocal sound. So yeah, everything's doable, but at a price. So at that moment, you should just consider just asking for what you need, the essentials, Maybe you need a little kick, and maybe your vocal and your guitar, but maybe, not an overload of keyboards, maybe just a little bit, so you can hear, if a keyboard player starts the song, you can hear them start the song. Then once you roll in, you just kind of feel it, So just things like that to consider, just to keep it simple, not to try to do a full house mix. It is a possibility to do that, but that usually comes in once you have your own engineer that travels with you, where you can have a full house mix on the side fills and maybe your vocals on the wedges in front of you. So there's some form of separation. But when you using just your wedges in front of you, I will just try to keep it as simple as possible.
Right. We mentioned before, in a situation like that, sometimes less is more. Like, if you can hear the drummer behind you, maybe you just need a little hi-hat because he's counting certain pieces in. If you're hearing your guitars behind you, you don't need them in the wedges. If you hear the drums behind you, you don't need them in your wedges. What you do need in your wedges are your vocals. So make sure the important things are taken care of. Maybe you need some hi-hat, maybe you need your vocals, maybe you need the other vocals that the other guys are singing. But as Eddie is saying, you don't necessarily need to just ask for everything just because you can, because at a certain point, you're going to run into a ceiling. And beyond that ceiling, it's feedback city. And you'll have all this mix, and then you'll ask for, I need more vocal. I can't hear myself. Give me more vocals, right? So
that's when you start turning things down.
Exactly.
At that point, you just got to turn other things down And then you also got to keep in mind the PA. If the PA, the PA is on obviously during the show, and a lot of times you're gonna feel the kick drum more than anything else because of the nature of the way sound is traveling around you. So then you obviously don't need a lot of kick, or if you do, it's very little just to hear the attack of it, but you don't need it as loud as the PA is.
Right.
So just try to keep that in mind, that you don't need to have it as loud. I mean, back in the day of rock and roll days, and they wanted everything to be super loud, and that was the only way to hear yourself. But now technology is completely different, and you have mixers who are automating things and doing all kinds of stuff for people to hear themselves everywhere. So
that's actually perfect time to segue from Wedges, which are the floor monitors, to in-ears. So maybe you could tell us a little about, not necessarily, so what are in-ears from your experience? How are they different for you as the person working it? And how would a musician best communicate with you in regards to what they want in their in-ears?
Well, in-ears are basically, earphones. They're miniature speakers that you can put, that are molded most of the time if you spend the money, customize them to your ears, that allows you to hear whatever else they're sending, or whatever it is that they're sending to your mix.
Yeah.
I think when in-ears came about, it was like many, many years ago, but I think now it's kind of a standard. I think everybody, even people starting out, already have a pair of in-ears, or even if they're not customized, but they use in-ears in one shape or form. But I think it's changed everything, because now, especially myself, since I have a studio background as well, it allows me to bring in, studio techniques or studio approaches in mixing to my artists, or to the musicians that perform with the artists, because I have the luxury that I don't have monitors or floor monitors or wedges or side fills on stage, and I can literally make either like a CD type mix, or more like a front of house mix in their ears, without risking any feedback or any bleed of the mic or this and that. So I think it has revolutionized the way anybody is able to hear things while they're performing. Yeah.
And as an artist, I have to agree. I mean, just wow. I mean, I said this in the video that I mentioned before that I did about the in-ears, but Eddie just works his magic. I mean, he's using multiple layers of compression, multiple verbs, delays. I mean, it simply just sounds like an album in your ears. If that's what you want. If you just want to click in your guitar, that's cool too. Like he said, he'll do that. But if you want it, and I usually want it, I'm just like, hey, do your thing, because it sounds like a mixed record, 100%.
Yeah, and different artists want different things. I mean, even when I did Tear for Fears, which is an 80s band, and to me, one of the coolest, style of music to be able to be like a mixer, like as far as creating landscapes and reverbs and delays and all these cool things you can do with it, and to be able to mix that for them and their in-ears. And there's such a good band that it was just like a record in there. So it was pretty cool. It was a lot of fun to do that. Some artists like it, some artists don't. Some artists just need what they need. And I understand it now. I used to be a little more, I used to question it a little more before. But with experience, you learn that this is, like I said, it's a service that we're providing that is about them. It's what they need. So, Gwen, for instance, she loves having, reverb and delay and always constantly moving and making, it's not a static mix. It's constantly moving, and I'm panning things, I'm turning guitars up, down, synths, drums up, down, depending on the song. It's just, you see me moving constantly, but when you hear the mix, it just sounds pretty even, and that's, it's fun to mix that way, and they also enjoy it. Like if she plays with the audience, or there's a certain song, you throw in a delay shot, and that makes it enjoyable to them also, and they like it. Enrique, for instance, he's the opposite when it comes to the sonic portion of it. He's not looking for like a record mix. His mix is more like a utility mix, because he goes into several places of the venue. He's not only running all over the place, but he has a runway. It's like a 40-foot runway, and then there's a stage behind front of house. So those are very, very difficult situations when you have, 50,000 screaming fans and the PA is blowing right on his mic now, in his mic, and then you have a stage behind front of the house, and so now you have a delay to add to that. And it's a little different. So if I was to give him a record mix or a music mix, then now he has that music mix in the PA music mix arriving at different times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of them is actually hitting his microphone and being fed again into his in-ears at a different time. So I understand now, after obviously the time that I work with him, why that's not something that he looks for, because he just needs something that's going to keep him in time. So that's why the click is always there, whether the song has tracks or not. There's going to be a click just to keep in time, so the delay of the PA doesn't throw anybody off. So that's important to remark, because not everybody looks for that. Bass players, sometimes you want to give them a nice, solid, balanced mix, and they're like, nope, just give me my bass, my key bass, and this and that, couple of things, and that's what they need. And you know what? They perform wonderfully. Like, they're amazing musicians. So it's what they need to perform. So sometimes what we think is better is not necessarily what's best for them. So that's something to consider, something to keep in mind.
Well, you bring up a great point. From your perspective, what is the difference between working an in-ear mix in a small club versus a big arena?
Good question. There is one thing that I always try to, like a habit that I try to instill in my artists, which is look at the in-ears as earplugs that actually have sound coming out of it. So initially you put them in and now you're blocking all the sound. So don't just go straight up and turn all the way up or really loud. Just kind of bring it in slowly until you hear yourself clearly, but not loudly. If you start loud, you're always going to go louder. You're never going to go quieter. That's just a given. It's just the way we operate, right? As humans, I guess. So the reason I say this is because, the approach is the same, whether it's a small club or a big venue. First and foremost, you have to protect your ears. So in a small venue, you may not have the overheads and maybe all the toms, you may not even have any of the drums, because maybe your microphone is right in front of it and your microphone is picking up a lot of it. You may just have kind of the basics of what you need, a little of the keyboards, a little guitar, and your vocal really loud. And that might just be enough, because it's kind of bleeding through everything else. But like I said, some people even have that approach on a big venue. So again, it always comes back to what they need to perform. The differences, if I was to really point out a major difference, obviously, acoustically, they're completely different. So that's something to keep in mind. Because you play in a club, it doesn't mean you got to have a bad in-ear mix. As long as you have what you need and it still sounds good, why not? A little EQ goes a long way. Mm-hmm. A lot of people sometimes wonder why, their voice sounds muffled when they put in-ears. And let's just say they haven't even put a filter or an EQ on their vocal channel.
Just completely flat.
Completely flat, and they're just talking on the mic, goes, oh, this is horrible, it's just muffled. And then to correct that, they just keep turning it up and up and up to combat the fact that they can't hear it clearly. And what happens is, and I don't know if you're wearing in-ears right now, but I am wearing in-ears right now when I'm talking to you, and I can hear myself through my bones. Like, I can literally hear myself, and I'm hearing basically all the muddy part, all the low mid section of it. I'm not going to get technical about it, but all the low mid, the muddy is what we call muddy, right? And I don't hear that clarity, the brightness of my voice almost at all, unless I'm going to turn it up really loud in my headphones, in my in-ears, which I don't want to do because it's plenty loud right now. And also, whatever the sound that I have going is for this interview purpose, not for me to hear myself. So if you EQ your voice in a certain way, brighten it up, remove what we're already hearing through ourselves here, and keep the volume down of your overall vocal, you're going to hear yourself clearly, but not loudly. And that's great, because you don't need it to be that loud to hear yourself, because you already have a lot of gain coming from your body. So that's important. That goes for, like, if you're playing an acoustic guitar, you kind of, if it's a true acoustic guitar, not an electric acoustic, but you kind of feel it through the wood. Drummers feel it through their hands or through their foot, as they're hitting the drums. So what I need to give them is not the real low end of the drums. They usually want to hear the attack because they kind of feel the rest.
Yeah.
So all those things, you kind of add them up and keep them in mind, and your mix will become better. It's not a volume thing. Most people think, I can't hear it clearly, turn me up. If you just brighten something up or cut some of the lows on that vocal, all of a sudden you're going to hear it crystal clear. So just, that's something I wanted to make a reference to, because that goes for a club, especially I would say in a club, because the sound is probably going to be really muddy because everybody's really close together. So the more you can cut all that mud, 400, anywhere from 200 or 160 to 400 hertz, if this makes any sense to anybody out there, just cut that a little bit on your whole mix, and everything will be a little clearer.
And if it doesn't make sense, feel free to leave a comment and ask me, and we can answer you, or I can tell you. So on that note, you mentioned a few artists that you work with, just a tiny little sample because you've worked with so many. I'm curious, I mentioned in my video about in-ears, I mentioned that if you don't have the right person behind the board, handling your ears, you might run into some problems. You might run into someone that doesn't know how to handle in-ears, and they could destroy your ears and possibly really damage your hearing. You mentioned sometimes it's as simple as like, I can't hear my vocals clearly. Let me just turn it up. And then the drummer comes in, and you're just destroyed. So do you have any story or experience that that happened to someone?
Yeah, there's many. We can make one that is kind of constructive, I guess, where, I had artists, after they hear the mix that I gave them, and after I have the conversation with them about the volume of their body pack, and where the way I'm mixing with my gain structure, where they should run, at what level they should run the pack to get the best result. But they always tell me, but I was told that I need to run it over here. And I was like, but you also told me that your ears ring every time after a show, right? So perhaps try it my way, and if you don't like it, we can revert to the other way. I'm just trying to protect your ears and give you a good mix and this and that. And they try it and they're happy right from the get-go. Because it's what I was saying earlier. You can have a mix that is crystal clear, that is not that loud, has this kind of perceived loudness. Almost like if you're mastering a record, you kind of make it, you change the dynamic range of everything and just leave it right there where everything's being heard without it having to be really loud,
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's, I guess it doesn't qualify necessarily as a crazy story, but just people do have bad habits that they've been created by other engineers sometimes. Some have the patch running all the way up, so that doesn't give the option to the artist to go any louder.
And on that point, there's actually, it doesn't always have to be the engineer that could screw your ears up. It could be you just turning your pack up completely before you even heard any drums, before you've heard any keys, before anything. First thing you get on stage, you go to your pack, blast it to full, and then the drums come in and destroy your ears. Sometimes it can be as simple as that. It's not necessarily the engineer. So what you're saying is very, very good point. Listen to your engineer. They're there to guide you. They're there to help you.
And also, a lot of the stuff, or at least the way my approach in mixing is a lot about being in context. So if you walk in, let's just say, it wasn't the case, but let's just say you walk in and you hit your guitar and go, oh man, my guitar is too loud. I'm like, just give it play with everybody first. Hang on a second. You mentioned before, I do a lot of, multi-step compression where I'm in different layers, or on my master bus before it hits the in-ears, I have compression and EQ, limiter, stereo widening, all these things that once it's in context and things start being compressed and tighten up and everything's going to sit right where you need it to sit. So it's very hard to judge that. Like or let's say it's your mix, like I mentioned before. You walk in and you haven't hit your guitar yet, but the drummer hits the kick drum and goes, oh yeah, that's way too loud. Or if I say something on the main mic and you go, oh, that vocal is going to be too loud for me. I'm like, wait a second, just hear it in context. And I try to explain that, and most people are very receptive, and then when they play a song, they realize right away that everything's where it should be. It's just because of the way I have my compression and my limiting set up that individual instruments might seem a little louder at the beginning, but once everybody's playing, it's normal, It's just an approach. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just the way I do it. But it allows them to have that perceived loudness overall, where they don't have to run their pack so loud. They can run their pack a little quieter and still hear everything, It's like listening to in the studio, like when you're mixing or, we listen to a mix very quiet just to make sure everything translates. Kind of that same concept. Of course, we have to keep in mind PAs being on and screaming fans and other things. But that's why I'm there to continue to be mixing and making adjustments as the night goes on.
And to give you an example from my experience and from my mixes, when I get on stage, I will turn on my pack, usually to about 11 or 12 o'clock, and I'll play my guitar. But if I can't hear it loud enough, I'll tell the drummer, can you just hit a few things? Because maybe the pack needs to be at 3 o'clock. Or maybe my guitar is just really low. Maybe it's at the right place, and when the drummer hits, I'm just like, wow, that's really loud. So yeah.
Or I might be on the wrong snapshot, for instance. Like you walked in, you hit the guitar, and I might be on a snapshot that is for the acoustic set or for something else. So there's some variables that obviously by asking, like you said, you check with the drums. See, hit the drums. Oh no, they're sitting right. Then my guitar is too low.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that I will never make an adjustment for you. It just means give it a second because in context, everything will be normal.
That's the important thing, in context.
Correct. Yeah, and if it's not normal in context, then absolutely we'll make the change that is needed.
Awesome. I know we didn't have a crazy story for in-ear mishaps, but do you have any crazy stories that you feel like sharing about being a monitor engineer?
I've had artists, that for the most part, when they say, I don't know how to describe what I want, which I always feel that that's not true. They've been led to believe that they don't know what they want or they don't know how to express it. But, it's our job to interpret. So I tell people, just tell me whatever it is that you feel that your sound should be like, And they're like, well, I just kind of want to if you can make this kind of blue.
We've all been there.
And I'm like, what? Like, yeah. So it's kind of a cliche, but it does happen. Like people label things that are sonic
as visual. It happens a lot to artists. I've encountered a lot of artists like that.
Correct. So they make an analogy or a parallel with something that is visual, and that's okay because I have to figure out how to interpret that. So it's part of our job to interpret that. I know it's not the crazy story you were looking for.
No, I get you.
It's
I mean, you experience it in the studio as well. And for people watching, there's nothing wrong with that.
Oh, yeah.
But one of the reasons that we did this video is so you have a better idea of how to communicate with your engineer, So you know what wedges are, you know what in-ears are, you know what side fills are. And if you need a reminder about all these things in the form of a short video, I mentioned it before, you can watch the in-ears video that I talk about. Well, Eddie, thank you so much for spending some time with us, helping out the younger artists, maybe helping out even established artists that needed some understanding, a little more depth into understanding your world. Thanks for all the years of working with me. I can't wait to do it again. And do me a favor real quick. Tell us, give me a little plug about your Sonic Ninjas.
Oh, yeah. So Brad Divins, who's our front of house engineer with Enrique and good friend of mine, we decided during this shelter-in-place time that we want to continue to share our stories and talk about gear and sound and all this cool stuff. Sometimes even food recipes, because we love Thai food. So we just, every now and then get together online on Facebook Live under Sonic Ninjas. And we just talk and chat and do our thing. We, if I may, like you said, plug it. YouTube channel is Sonic Ninjas. On Instagram, we're the Sonic Ninjas because someone took it. And yeah, so Facebook Sonic Ninjas too. Join us, come see us, and hit us up if you have any questions or any topics you want us to touch up.
Yeah, perfect. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ding, ding, ding. Do that for Sonic Ninjas as well, and I'll catch you next week.